Ladies and gentlemen, let's drop the polite preamble because we're not here to play small. We're here to ascend. Today you're going to discover communication secrets that many ignore, so they stay average. But average isn't our destination. Our destination is influence, presence, command, and yes, an unfair advantage, because when you master how you speak, how you show up, how you move through a conversation, you gain what others don't even see coming. So buckle in, clear your mind, commit right now to owning what I'm about to share before you ever open your mouth. The room already knows who you are. Energy introduces you before language does. The moment you step through the door, the atmosphere either bends toward you or ignores you. That's not about arrogance, it's about alignment. It's about walking in already decided, already certain, already grounded in the weight of your purpose. Because if you wait to speak before you command attention, you're already too late. People don't follow words, they follow presence, and presence is built long before the conversation starts. It's built in how you think when no one's watching, how you prepare when nobody's cheering, how you walk when there's no applause. Owning the room isn't about dominating people, it's about controlling the frequency. When you walk in with clarity of who you are and what you stand for, you shift the emotional gravity of that space. You don't need to announce it, you don't need to prove it, people just feel it. You've met those individuals before. The ones who walk in and suddenly the temperature changes. You don't know why, but you straighten up a bit. You start listening more carefully. That's not coincidence, that's intention. They've built their inner world so strong that it spills out into the outer one. Their energy carries discipline, certainty, and self-respect. And that's what owning the room looks like. It's the quiet dominance of someone who has already conquered themselves. Most people walk into a room looking for validation. They look around, measuring how others see them, waiting to adjust their tone, their body, their voice based on the feedback they get. But the ones who truly own the room flip that dynamic completely. They walk in knowing exactly what they bring to the table, and their only focus is impact, not approval. You can feel the difference instantly. One is needy, the other is necessary. One is hoping to fit in, the other is determined to raise the standard. So how do you build that? It starts in silence. It starts before the meeting, before the stage, before the spotlight. It starts when you remind yourself, I am enough and I've earned my voice. You align your breathing, your posture, your mindset. You ground yourself in gratitude, in preparation, in purpose, because when your inner world is steady, your outer presence becomes unshakable. You can't fake that. You can't script that. The world recognizes when a person walks in who's done the internal work. When you walk in with ownership, every detail matters. The way you move your shoulders, the way you make eye contact, the pace of your stride. All of it communicates confidence without noise. You don't rush. You don't shrink. You hold a space, because owning the room isn't about being the loudest. It's about being the most centered. The loudest person is trying to prove something. The centered person already knows who they are. That's why you never compete with the noise. You create silence around your voice. You let people lean in, not because you're shouting, but because your energy demands attention. That's mastery. That's authority born from calm, not chaos. And when you start living like that, you stop chasing respect. Respect starts chasing you. Every room you enter has invisible power dynamics. Some walk in as observers, some as participants, but few as anchors. Anchors don't move with the tide, they define the space, they stabilize the energy. That's what happens when you know your worth. You're no longer swayed by opinions, compliments, or criticism. You become the constant in a world of variables. But here's the truth that most won't tell you. Owning the room has nothing to do with ego and everything to do with service. When your focus is to elevate, not to impress, you lead naturally. People trust presence that's rooted in purpose. They feel safe following energy that's consistent, because deep down everyone is drawn to clarity, and clarity is what confidence sounds like when it's quiet. You own the room when your intent is bigger than your insecurities. When you're not performing to be seen, but showing up to make something better, that's where real influence comes from. People won't always remember your exact words, but they'll remember how your energy made them stand taller, think deeper, believe more. That's the power you carry when you stop trying to get attention and start deserving it. So before you walk into your next room, pause. Don't rush in scrolling your phone, doubting your voice, shrinking your presence. Take a breath, remind yourself why you're there. Straighten your spine, lift your head, calm your heart. Let purpose sit in your chest before words leave your mouth, because that's where real communication begins, not in speaking, but in being. And when you do that consistently, people will start whispering things about you that you'll never need to say about yourself. They'll say, something about them just feels different. That's not magic, that's mastery. That's what happens when you walk in already decided that you belong there. You don't wait for permission. You don't wait for validation. You don't wait for someone to hand you authority. You step into it. You live it, you embody it. That's how you own the room before you speak. Because true power doesn't announce itself, but arrives, and the room adjusts. Power isn't in the volume of your words. It's in the precision of your silence. Most people talk to fill space. Leaders talk to create impact. The ones who truly move rooms, shift minds, and build influence understand this. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. When you learn to hold back your words until they carry purpose, every sentence you speak begins to carry weight. And that's what separates those who are heard from those who are remembered. You see, average communicators speak to be understood, but powerful communicators listen to understand. They don't chase the spotlight, they observe it. They study tone, emotion, timing. They see the unsaid, they hear the unspoken, they read what's hidden between pauses. That's where real insight lives, not in noise, but in awareness. Because when you listen deeply, you gain the advantage most people miss: perspective. Talking is easy. Listening takes discipline. It demands ego control. It requires you to quiet the part of you that's always preparing your next point, your next defense, your next I know. Because the moment you stop truly listening, you stop learning. And the ones who stop learning lose their power the fastest. The world doesn't reward noise. It rewards understanding. You've probably met people who dominate conversations. They talk endlessly, trying to sound important, to prove their intelligence. But while they're busy proving, the quiet ones are collecting data. They're learning who's insecure, who's strong, what the real problem is. They're forming solutions in silence. Then, when they finally speak, every word lands like a punch of truth. That's the art of power. Strategic timing backed by deep awareness. Listening doesn't mean agreeing. It means respecting the moment enough to see it clearly. When you listen, you gather emotional information. What people fear, what they need, what they believe. And once you understand those patterns, you can speak directly into them. That's how you move hearts, not just minds. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop competing for space and start commanding it. The reason most conversations spiral into chaos is because everyone's trying to be right instead of trying to understand. But when you lead with listening, you stop arguing for ego and start speaking for impact. You become the calm in the noise. People trust that energy, they follow it. Because in a world addicted to shouting, the one who speaks with intention becomes the loudest voice without ever raising the volume. Listening sharpens intuition. It helps you read the undercurrent, not just the surface. You can tell when someone's confidence is real and when it's a mask. You can tell when someone's passion is authentic and when it's performance. That kind of insight gives you leverage, not to manipulate, but to connect with precision. Because once you understand someone's truth, your words can guide, influence, or challenge in ways that pierce through resistance. But you can't fake listening. People feel when your silence is attention and when it's arrogance. Listening requires presence. It means you're not waiting for your turn to speak. You're absorbing, you're engaged, you're fully there. That kind of focus is magnetic. When people feel heard, they open up. When they open up, they trust. And trust is the foundation of every form of influence. The ones who master this skill never rush to respond. They let the silence breathe, because silence creates gravity. It forces others to lean in, to think, to reflect, and when you finally respond, measured, thoughtful, confident, your words cut through like a blade. That's how you create impact that lingers long after the conversation ends. Speaking less doesn't mean saying nothing. It means making every word count. It means stripping away filler language, empty phrases, and defensive chatter. It means speaking only when your words will add clarity, direction, or truth. Because the most powerful communicators are not the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who make the room pause when they do. In business, in leadership, in relationships, the same rule applies. The person who listens first and speaks last usually wins. Not because they're manipulative, but because they understand the full picture before they act. They make decisions based on awareness, not impulse. Their words are few, but their timing is lethal. They don't fight for attention. They earn it through composure. And here's the secret. When you listen more, you train others to listen to you. The energy you bring into a conversation becomes the energy it reflects back. If you come in loud and reactive, people match your chaos. But if you enter grounded, observant, intentional, the tone shifts. You become the mirror everyone else adjusts to. That's communication mastery. So the next time you're in a room, resist the urge to fill every silence. Let others speak. Let them reveal who they are. Let them show you their patterns. Every pause you hold is a test of discipline, every silence a seed of authority. Because when you finally open your mouth, your words won't be lost in noise, they'll command attention. That's what it means to speak less, listen more, and respond powerful. You don't waste energy proving your worth. You let your awareness do the talking. You conserve your power until it matters, then release it with precision. You don't need to dominate the room. You simply need to master yourself. And when you do, your voice becomes more than sound. It becomes influence. Powerful communication isn't about sounding smart. It's about being understood. The greatest mistake most people make when they speak is that they try to impress instead of connect. They dress their words in complexity, thinking big words create authority, but truth doesn't need decoration. Clarity is strength. Simplicity cuts deeper than sophistication ever could. When you learn to use simple words to deliver massive impact, you stop trying to sound important and start becoming unforgettable. Think about it. The most timeless speeches, the most quoted leaders, the most transformative messages, none of them were built on complicated language. They were built on direct human truth, because real power isn't found in fancy vocabulary. It's found in emotional precision. It's found in words that hit the heart before the brain even has time to analyze. When you speak simply, people don't have to decode you, they feel you. Most people confuse simplicity with weakness. They think if their words are easy to understand, they're losing depth. But the truth is, simplicity takes mastery. It's easy to hide behind complexity. It's hard to make something profound sound effortless. The more you know, the fewer words you need, because understanding doesn't shout, it whispers, and everyone still hears it. The reason simple words carry massive impact is because they bypass resistance. Complicated language makes people think. Simple language makes them move. When your message is clear, it leaves no room for confusion, no space for hesitation. It lands clean, it sticks, it lives in their mind long after you've stopped speaking. That's not luck, that's intentional clarity. To speak simply, you have to remove ego from your communication. You have to stop performing and start serving. When your focus shifts from how do I sound to how do they feel, your words start carrying power. You stop building walls with language and start building bridges. You stop trying to prove your intelligence and start demonstrating your wisdom. People don't follow perfection. They follow authenticity. When you speak in simple words, you sound real. You sound human. You sound like someone who understands life, not someone trying to impress with theory. And in a world drowning in overcomplicated talk, authenticity cuts through the noise like a blade. People can sense when your words are pure and when they're packaged. Purity has weight, it's magnetic. It demands attention. Simple communication also forces you to think clearly. When you can't explain something simply, it means you don't fully understand it. Complexity often hides confusion. So when you strip your message down to its essence, you expose what really matters. You start to see what's fluff and what's truth. That process of refining your language until every word counts is how you build influence that lasts. Every word you use carries energy. The shorter, cleaner, and more intentional your words, the sharper that energy becomes. Think of your language like a blade. Every extra word dulls its edge. But when you trim it down to what matters most, your message slices through doubt, fear, and distraction. It doesn't wander, it lands. That's how impact is created. Look at the words that move the world. Yes, no, enough, stop, go, believe. None of them are complicated. Yet they carry worlds inside them, because meaning doesn't come from size. It comes from intent. When your intent is strong, your words don't need dressing. They stand tall on their own. The discipline to speak simply comes from knowing yourself. When you're secure, you don't need to overtalk. You don't need to prove anything. You say what you mean, and that's enough. Simplicity is a reflection of confidence. The insecure hide behind complexity. The certain stand behind truth. The fewer words it takes for you to express your message, the more powerful your presence becomes. You'll notice that the greatest communicators always leave space. They don't rush. They let their words breathe. They allow silence to complete the message, because simplicity isn't just in the language. It's in the delivery. It's the confidence to pause, to let your words sink in, to let others absorb what you said instead of drowning them in more. When your speech becomes simple, your influence becomes massive because simplicity travels fast. Complex language makes people stop and think. Simple language makes people act. Action is where transformation lives. So if your goal is to change, move, or inspire others, speak in a way they can feel instantly. That's the real art of impact. So before you speak next time, ask yourself, what am I really trying to say? Strip it down, remove every unnecessary layer. Choose words that reach the heart, not the dictionary. Because your power doesn't come from how much you say, it comes from how deeply it lands. You don't need to sound perfect. You don't need to sound poetic. You need to sound real. Real language creates real connection, and connection is the birthplace of influence. When you master that, your words stop being noise. They become fire, because at the end of the day, communication isn't about showing people how smart you are. It's about showing them what's possible. It's about reaching the human in them with the human in you. And the simpler your words, the louder your truth echoes. That's how you create massive impact. With clarity, not complexity, most people spend their entire lives describing the problem instead of defining the outcome. They get addicted to talking about what's wrong, what's missing, what's unfair. And they don't realize that every time they repeat the problem, they reinforce it. Words are energy, and whatever you focus on expands. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who rise is perspective. The ones who win know that the problem is never the point. The outcome is. They don't speak from pain, they speak from possibility. Framing the outcome isn't denial, it's direction. It means refusing to give your power to what's broken and instead focusing it on what can be built. The moment you frame the outcome, your energy changes. You stop sounding like a victim and start speaking like a visionary. You stop waiting for solutions and start creating them. You start to sound like someone who knows where they're going, not someone who's still trying to understand why they're lost. When you frame the outcome, you take control of the narrative. You decide what the story will be about. Most people talk about the storm. They describe the chaos, the fear, the damage. But leaders, the ones who create momentum, talk about the rebuild. They talk about the lessons, the comeback, the transformation. They don't deny the storm happened. They just refuse to give it the final word. That's the mindset that turns pain into progress and setbacks into fuel. Every conversation you have is either planting doubt or planting direction. When you lead with the problem, people see limits. When you lead with the outcome, they see hope. That's why true communicators don't get stuck repeating what's wrong. They reframe it into what's next. Because language is leadership, and leadership isn't about describing reality. It's about redefining it. When you frame the outcome, your words stop being emotional reactions and start becoming emotional anchors. You begin to set a new emotional tone for everyone around you. Instead of spreading frustration, you start spreading focus. Instead of talking about obstacles, you start talking about execution. And that shift, though it looks small, changes everything. Because you can't lead people out of darkness by describing how dark it is. You lead them out by pointing toward the light. Framing the outcome doesn't mean ignoring the pain. It means transforming it into purpose. You acknowledge the challenge, but you don't let it dominate the room. You look at what's in front of you and say, yes, this is real, but so is what's possible. You redirect attention toward progress. Because energy flows where focus goes, and if your focus is always on the problem, that's exactly what grows. It takes discipline to think this way. It's easier to complain than to construct. It's easier to analyze failure than to visualize success. That's why few people do it. Framing the outcome requires emotional maturity. It requires you to detach from needing to be right and commit to creating results. You stop feeding the ego that wants to argue and start feeding the spirit that wants to move forward. You'll notice that the people who shift rooms, the ones who inspire action, speak differently. They don't waste time describing how hard things are. They speak about what's next, what's possible, what's coming. Their language creates momentum because they understand that words are blueprints. Every time you speak about the outcome, you're building it. Every time you dwell on the problem, you're living in it. Framing the outcome also trains your mind to operate from solutions, not stress. When you talk about where you're going, your brain starts working on how to get there. It becomes creative instead of reactive. It starts finding answers instead of collecting excuses. That's how innovators, leaders, and champions think. They're not blind to reality, they just refuse to let it define the ending. You can always tell the difference between people who lead and people who linger. The ones who linger talk about how bad it is. The ones who lead talk about what they're going to do about it. The language is everything. The ones who frame the outcome naturally draw people in because they speak from conviction. They give people something to believe in, something to build toward. When you start framing the outcome in your own life, your entire environment changes. You stop attracting people who want to gossip about problems and start attracting people who want to create progress. You become magnetic to solutions, to momentum, to growth. because your energy no longer says I'm stuck, it says I'm building. And when you practice this long enough, it becomes instinct. You don't waste time describing the fire. You start organizing the rebuild. You don't dwell on who hurt you. You focus on who you're becoming. You don't replay the loss. You prepare for the next win, because what you focus on shapes what you create. Framing the outcome is one of the highest forms of leadership you can ever practice. It teaches you to control your narrative before it controls you. It reminds you that life responds to clarity, not complaint. The moment you decide to speak in outcomes instead of problems, you start aligning yourself with solutions. You start seeing opportunity where others only see obstacles. So the next time you catch yourself describing what's wrong, stop. Take a breath, reframe it, ask yourself, what do I want this to become? Then speak from that place. Because the power to shift any situation isn't in how well you describe the struggle, it's in how clearly you define the destination. That's how you turn language into leadership and problems into progress. Repetition can make noise, but only action creates echoes that last. Too many people talk themselves out of credibility by saying more than they do. They repeat the same promises, the same plans, the same motivational lines, but nothing changes. The truth is, words lose their power when they aren't backed by motion. You can't inspire anyone, not even yourself, through repetition alone. The world doesn't move because of what you say, it moves because of what you show. Real authority begins when your actions start finishing the sentences your mouth began. Every time you say something and follow through, your reputation compounds. Every time you say something and don't, your influence bleeds. People may hear your words once, but they watch your actions forever. And when they realize your steps match your speech, they trust you, they respect you, they listen to you even in silence. Repeating fewer words doesn't mean you stop speaking. It means you start speaking with purpose. It means you stop using language as decoration and start using it as direction. You don't waste your voice convincing others of your plans. You let your consistency prove it. You speak once, then demonstrate 1,000 times. That's what separates the talkers from the transformers. In a world full of noise, the person who moves becomes impossible to ignore. People are addicted to saying, I will. The few who live I did are the ones who build legacies. Every moment you act, you create evidence, evidence of discipline, evidence of vision, evidence of belief, and evidence always speaks louder than repetition ever will. You don't need to say you're committed. Show it through your habits. You don't need to announce you're focused. Let your results expose it. You don't need to tell the world you're grinding. Let your progress prove it, because the loudest people in the room are usually the quietest when it's time to deliver. But the ones who operate in silence, who let action be their language, eventually make so much impact that their results speak in every room they enter. When you repeat fewer words, you preserve energy. You stop wasting time explaining yourself to those who aren't moving at your frequency. You no longer need validation. You're too busy executing. You realize that your job isn't to convince anyone, it's to become undeniable. That's how power is built, not through endless talk, but through relentless consistency. Action amplifies your message because it multiplies your credibility. When people see results, they start believing without you saying a thing. You could give the same speech, the same advice, the same story, but it only carries weight if your life reflects it. You can't preach what you don't practice. You can't lead where you haven't walked. So every time you say something, check if your behavior is reinforcing or weakening your message, because your audience, whether it's one person or 1,000, isn't judging your words, they're measuring your alignment. Every time you deliver through action, you create momentum. Words can motivate, but motion multiplies, and momentum is contagious. When people watch you move consistently toward your purpose, they start moving too. You become a standard, not a speaker. That's when your influence shifts from verbal to visible. That's the kind of impact that lives beyond applause. Repeating fewer words also protects your authenticity. When you speak too much, you risk overpromising and underdelivering. But when you speak less and act more, you underpromise and overdeliver. And that's where power lies. You don't owe anyone explanations. You owe yourself execution. The people who talk the most about their goals are often the ones furthest from achieving them. But the ones who disappear into the work always return with results that speak for them. Every step you take reinforces a message that can't be argued with. The message that you're serious, that you're reliable, that you mean every word you say. Over time, your consistency becomes your character, and your results become your resume. People will trust your silence more than they trusted your speeches. Because in a world that glorifies talk, silence backed by achievement becomes deafening. The discipline to speak less and act more also builds inner confidence. You don't need external praise to feel valuable. You start to respect yourself because you follow through. And that self-respect radiates. You walk differently, talk differently, carry yourself differently. You stop over-explaining because you know who you are and what you do. That's the energy that commands attention without trying to. So when you say something, mean it, then do it. Don't keep repeating it, hoping people will believe you. Let time and consistency be your proof. Let results be your argument. Let your actions preach louder than your words ever could. Because real leadership isn't built in what you say. It's proven in what you repeat through action every single day. At the end of the day, no one remembers what you said as much as they remember what you did. Talk fades, action echoes, every move you make builds a legacy that speaks when you're not in the room. So stop trying to amplify your message through repetition. Amplify it through execution. Speak once. Deliver always, and when the noise dies down, your results will still be standing, telling your story louder than your voice ever could. So here's where you stand. The choice is yours. You can go back to the old patterns, the soft voice, the half-promised action. Or you can step into the arena, own the room, speak with purpose, deliver with power, because when you master these 5 secrets, you don't just communicate, you influence, you don't just participate, you lead. And you create an unfair advantage that others don't even know how you got. Now go out there, speak your truth, live your message, make your mark, because the world isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's waiting for you to show up. Thank you.